Okay, we're starting. Yeah. Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar titled A Deep Dive Discussion on Clean Address. Today, we are going to go over some of the features and functionalities of Clean Address from a functional and technical perspective with the help of Scott McGrath, our Senior Developer Engineer here at RunnerEDQ. My name is Eric Paye. I'm in the marketing department, and I'm also going to be joined by Misty, who will be moderating our webinar today through the chat box. So we encourage you to ask questions via that chat box. Misty will be monitoring that chat box throughout this webinar. It is scheduled for 45 minutes. It may go over depending on the amount of questions that we have that is scheduled at the end of the day. If anyone has a hard stop, don't worry. We will be recording this, and we can send a link to you after the presentation. So thank you very much for allowing us to put on this presentation today. I hope everyone takes away a little bit of information that they didn't have before. And with no further ado, we are going to move forward with this presentation in our deep dive discussion on Clean Address. So some of you obviously may know about us, and some of you may not know a little bit about us, but we're going to touch about who we are in a very brief statement. Runner Enterprise Data Quality has been in the data quality and address verification solution arena for over 20 years, or actually approximately 22 years. So we call ourselves an authority in this area, and of course, we do have that ability to give you such features and functionalities via Clean Address, and of course in these various applications that you see below. This is a customer presentation, so therefore we are going to focus in on some of the features and functionalities of the Clean Address solution that you are currently using, and hopefully you'll be able to see and understand some of the things that you may not even know exist with Clean Address. We are going to touch upon a few things today. And in this agenda, we're going to talk about a functional demo. We're going to show you how it should be working within your environments, both for domestic and international. Some folks may not know that we actually have international address verification in these various applications. We're going to talk about the standardization and how it works throughout the applications that you're currently using. We are going to touch upon the real-time and batch processing, along with some of the deliverables that we have available to you, including a Java servlet that you may not know about. We're also going to talk about CleanFile, which is a batch processing application that uses an application to process flat files, and Scott will talk about that in detail, along with shadow tables. Some of you may not know or be aware that there are shadow tables that are available with our application, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then lastly, we'll cover some things that you may not know about our application, and then, of course, applying some of those updates, and, of course, we will open it up to questions and answers at the end of this presentation. A little bit about Clean Address. Of course, you are all enjoying this product and utility every day, and, of course, as you know, it does a wide range of things. The first thing, of course, that we like to talk about is that validation and the single point of entry, along with the ability to enforce your data standards across the enterprise. We're going to talk about how do we achieve those data standards and how we're applying those throughout the applications that you're currently using. And Scott will talk about that in detail here as we move along. Ultimately, we believe our product does optimize your staff productivity, along with, of course, bringing back the costs immediately that are expended every day. So as we look at this thing as a whole, we definitely have to talk about best practices. From us here, we always talk about capturing the addresses at the point of entry. Now the point of entry may be multiple points in your enterprise solution and application, and I think we're going to touch upon how we approach it from a Clean Address perspective and how you can use these utilities and applications that we're going to talk about today in capturing these addresses as they come into your system, which would be considered the point of entry. And secondly, we're going to talk about batch processing for your existing or legacy data, both from an internal perspective. Of course, we do have and you do enjoy having that application run right in your database. That's what separates us from the other folks as far as having that integration right into the application that you're using, and being able to batch process outside your database using that CleanFile application that we talked about earlier. And lastly, we're going to talk about updating those data changes from a periodical perspective. So again, Scott's going to touch upon a lot of these things in detail as we go along in this presentation. And remember, feel free to reach out to Misty as she is monitoring this thing, and we are going to answer these questions in order as they're received at the end of the presentation. So as we move along, we're going to touch upon domestic international demonstration. On this particular webinar, we are going to use PeopleSoft as our demonstration application. We're going to talk about the real-time functionality. It does validate against 150 million different U.S. delivery points here in the U.S. For domestic validation, and we cover 240 territories in countries worldwide for our international verification. We're always going to validate against the known database. And what we're doing automatically is we're formatting and standardizing all of those addresses while also, of course, automatically correcting those addresses in real time in the applications that you're currently using. So what does that standardization look like? Well, a lot of folks may be using one or maybe even multiple standards here that we're showing. I did note that the one in the far left middle in red is actually the USPS default standard. Many of you may not know that that is the default standard that the USPS would like to have your address appear, but that is the default standard that the USPS would like to maintain. Of course, all of these addresses in their current format are considered deliverable addresses in the standards that you see. Again, one of the great things and one of the great features our product allows you to do is to choose that format, enforce that format, and maintain that format throughout your applications, both in real time as well as in batch. Now, at this point, I'm going to pass this over to Scott so we can talk about how we achieve those customizations and those standards in the applications that you're using. Scott, go ahead.
Depending on the ERP that you have in place, you could be using any one of a number of different ways of accessing our core engine. We have CleanAdder D executable that's in your bin directory, which talks to the Oracle database. But we also have a CleanAdder WS executable, which fires up a web service. And that web service is consumed by Transact SQL or MySQL or any web-based application that's going to be hitting it via an HTTP call. Those executables use an INI file to start up, and this INI file contains a lot of parameters that by default will set your address to be that USPS standard that Eric just talked about in NITCAP instead of capitalized, because it looks a little bit better if it's a NITCAP. You can set it to be capitalized. But by going through your INI file in your Clean Address Core Engine interface, you can set the default parameters that you would like to see across your enterprise at any time. So you can, in this little section of those parameters, set your street suffixes to be Boulevard rather than BLVD, or to use a preferred city rather than the city that was put in, say, if someone lives in Beverly Hills and wants Beverly Hills shown instead of Los Angeles. Once you set your default standards for the enterprise, there is an application-specific user exit, which you can use if you wish to customize your application in certain circumstances. So, for instance, if a college or university wants to spell out names for Northeast, Boulevard, Street, and name suffixes like junior or senior for their alumni, but would like to have the USPS standards enforced for students or HR, you can set in the pre-address verify and post-address verify specific rules for different types of addresses, where it will say if the address is of this type or is looking sort of like something else, it will change those standards on the fly based on the address type that you wish to put in place. We can either validate or not validate addresses, which is basically what the pre-address verify is used for. And we can change those verification parameters based upon the standards, which is handled in the post-address verify.
All right, Scott, so thanks for sharing that information on how we achieve those standards throughout. So right now we're going to go through and show you in real time what those standards should look like. So again, we're going to put in some of these addresses. And again, we're using PeopleSoft as the application to do the demo in. And again, these are going to be domestic transactions. So in this case, we're going to put in a house number, a street number, and a zip code. And as we parse out of that zip code field, it automatically will update, correct, and format that address. Now notice that in these cases, the address directional or street directional is then truncated, NW instead of Northwest. In this case, we're going to show you how it also knows where to parse the suite number, again, based on those rules that Scott just talked about, parsing that suite number up on line 1. It also knows where to put names, company names, and so on and so forth as those components are added to each address field. Again, these are all done out of the box, and again, it's very intuitive as far as that's concerned when it comes to understanding how you want your addresses to appear. Again, the functionality does enable you to do a lot of things, especially when it comes to certain address types. Again, we're going to put in addresses that are misspelled. You're going to see that there are even multiple suggestions that are going to be introduced to you. And this functionality should be the same throughout all of our applications. But again, we're just showing you the functionality here, in this case, to show you that this particular address type was spelled out. So you'll see, notice that N went to completely spell out to north. And then, of course, once we choose that suite number, it put it on line 2 versus line 1. So again, this was all done by default, and this was all done also using the user exit options and configuration rules that Scott just described to us earlier. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to our global address verification. And again, 240 countries and territories worldwide. The great thing about the international address verification feature is that it takes the guessing game away as to what that address should appear like in your particular application. So while it's going to correct the address, it's also going to validate it against that particular country that you're delivering to, as well as format that address to the delivery standard of that country. So let's take a look at what that particular address functionality would look like using, again, PeopleSoft as our application to demo in. So in this case, you'll notice that we did do Canada as by the address to choose from for the country. Now remember, you do need to identify the country you are validating against in order to have that international validation. So as we put the address in, 145 Spruce, and go through some of the other address fields, you're going to notice that it does do a lot of the same type of functionality that the domestic does by validating against, in this particular case, the postal code along with that street name and street number. And once we tab out of that postal code field, it made the validation, updated the address format, added the city and the province. Again, taking the guessing game away from the user trying to figure out if this, number one, is a particular address has been not only validated, but is it correct as well as formatted in the standard that you'd like to have it appear. We're going to remain in Canada in this this next validation. And again, notice that we aren't formatting the address. We're putting in these addresses in their various fields. In this case, we're going to put in Vancouver. We will put in the province, British Columbia. And then by tabbing out of the British Columbian province field, it automatically updated the postal code as well as the other address fields. So this next particular demo, we're going to change the country. Now in PeopleSoft, believe it or not, the fields actually and the pages actually change to accommodate the country that we're validating against. And you're going to see this as we do our demo. So now that we changed this to Germany, notice that the address fields changed to accommodate the address. So in this particular demo, we're going to put in Lützowplatz, excuse my pronunciation if it wasn't exact. And we'll put in the postal code. And as we tab out, it will make that call to do the Clean Address Engine. Again, this is a web services call in this particular case because it is an international validation. And you'll notice that it actually changed everything to accommodate the deliverable standard for Germany. Again, we're going to change the country. We only have a couple of other demos here as far as the countries are concerned, but again, this is just to give you an understanding of how this functionality would work within your particular application. Each application's fields will act differently depending on the application that we're doing the international validation in. Again, in this case, we're using PeopleSoft to do this demo in. So 139 d'Italie, and we're going to put in the next component for this French address, which would be the postal code. And again, once you put that postal code in, it automatically updated to 139 Avenue d'Italie. It added Paris along with the postal code and the department. Again, it's very, very hands-off as far as that's concerned. And again, it will validate that address in real time as you see it here. So we're going to move on to this next screen, and we're going to talk about that Java servlet and how this Java servlet may help you with some of your real-time address verification needs and your enterprise. Now that we covered both domestic and international real-time verification within PeopleSoft, and again, this would be applicable to any application that you're using, we also can accommodate any custom web-based forms that you may have using this Java servlet. So again, I'm going to pass this over to Scott to talk a little bit more about how this Java servlet is deployed, along with how you would achieve the functionality in that custom page.
I mentioned before that there were 3 primary engine interfaces that we include in your bin directory. One is for Oracle, one is for the web service, and one is for flat files. That would be CleanAdder-D, CleanAdder-WS, and CleanFile. Depending on the integration that's being run, we need some way of talking to the USPS Postal Service database. And those are the 3 methods that we use to talk to them. If you are running an Oracle-based application, the updates that you receive every 2 months or every month if you're on a monthly subscription still include the interfaces for the other applications. So if you are on an Oracle database, you still have CleanAdder-WS in your bin directory, and you should be able to fire it up if you open the INI file and make it match the INI file that you have for your Oracle interface. Your clean address administrator should be able to do that for you. In the case of the web service, if the web service is up and running, it can talk to any web-based form anywhere in your enterprise. The problem is that because of security, the web server on that application will not allow web service calls to a third application. What you can do is install our Java servlet, which is in the demo directory of your download. Install it in a Java-based container like Tomcat or Glassfish, and that will interface with the web service in the back, as is demonstrated in the bottom there. So if you have an address entry web page and a custom application that's talking back and forth with your web application, you install that proxy servlet, and it will talk to the CleanAdder-WS, which is running in your CleanAddress installation. And it will transfer those calls just like your ERP or CRM integration does against our web service. And that allows you to put custom applications together anywhere that you would like to.
All right, great, Scott. Well, as we talk about the real time, now let's move on to batch processing. Now, batch processing, again, is well used throughout all of our customers. But we don't know if everybody knows all the functionality that you can get out of batch processing, and of course, all of the applications you may be able to use. Of course, one of them is CleanFile. When you purchased CleanAddress, you automatically had a lot of these applications that were brought to your you as far as the deliverable is concerned, but you may not be aware that they exist. So hopefully, by that description of the Java servlet, in case you do have those web-based applications that you may want to have address verification in that Scott just described. You can also use CleanFile for flat files outside of your database. So again, We're going to talk about batch processing and how that clean address will verify and correct a group of addresses within your database, along with, again, affecting not only domestic but international addresses. We are going to talk about the resulted reports, as well as how this functionality is achieved. So at this point, I'm going to pass this back over to Scott to talk a little bit about this batch verification procedure you see on the screen. This is right here a Spratter procedure call, but again, this is applicable to whatever application that you're using. And again, I'll let Scott define it a little bit further. Scott?
The batch verification procedures go against tables in your database that might hold any address information that may need to be standardized, verified, and validated. In this case, we have Spratter, which is the address table that is used by the Banner student information system. In the batch verify Spratter procedure, there is a number of parameters at the beginning that you can set to update certain types of addresses, certain dates that addresses were entered, people that have entered addresses, and only unverified addresses, which means addresses that have been put in via some sort of a back-end procedure like a batch upload that would not have gone through our standard interfaces that catch addresses that are entered incorrectly. I recommend that anybody that does any of the batch updates that we have on any of the tables that are built into our ERPs run the batch with the FB update turned to false the first time that you run it. That will allow you to catch addresses and mistakes that have been put in as part of the set of rules that you have at the beginning here. If there is a report that gets generated at the tail end of the batch job running, it will tell you the number of addresses that failed, that were updated, that were changed, what kinds of addresses were uploaded and updated. And if you run the update with FB update set to false, it will give you what would have been changed without changing those addresses. That way you don't end up changing every address in your database or validating a bunch of international addresses that you may not want to pay for before you actually do them. And if you end up with a number coming back which is surprising, you can change the parameters in order to make sure that your batch job is running the way you want it to before you actually run the batch job in earnest. We have batch verification built in for a number of different kinds of databases. So even if you're running on an Oracle database or a Transact SQL database, because we have the capability to run in MySQL, in SQL Server, in Oracle, you can run against other databases so long as the server that is running the clean address application has visibility to those database tables. And of course, as Eric mentioned earlier, we have CleanFile as well, so that you can spool data out of a table into a flat file, clean the flat file, and import it back into the database afterwards.
So as we talk about CleanFile, and thanks for that great segue, Scott. So as we talk about CleanFile again, you may have files that you might want to batch verify outside of your database. It could be marketing lists, it could be for campaign reasons, it could be just for a third-party list, maybe ACT, Nakura, or other lists that you may be handling on a day-to-day basis that you may not want to necessarily import into the application that you're currently using. So we did provide an application called CleanFile, which was delivered to you with your clean address deliverable. And again, Scott's going to talk a little bit about how this CleanFile application works and how it will work with these flat files that you may be wanting to process. Now, the processing is as follows, as you see on the screen. And again, I'll let Scott talk about how this processing goes through. We also have a small demo at the end of this particular set to show you exactly how it works.
Now, CleanFile is an application which takes a flat file that can be spooled out of a database table using a PL SQL or a SQL script or an Excel spreadsheet if you save it as a CSV or a bar delimited file. and tell clean file what it is looking at. The best way for you to get your head around clean file is to actually run it. It's in your bin directory now. It should run if cleanadder-D or cleanadder-WS runs. It is set up with an in file called cleanfile.dat, and it has a file that it generates called cleanfile.out. And if you look at the cleanfile.ini that is existing in your bin directory right now, you will see the fields from cleanfile.dat listed in the in-file parameters and the columns that are in the cleanfile.out listed in the out file parameters, as well as the delimiters in both of those files. And the file that goes in is a tab delimited file, and the file that goes out is a bar delimited file. So we cover pretty much all of the standard bases for what can happen as far as an in and an out file, with the exception of that positional fields section that is on the left-hand side there, where we have a file that has addresses and address 1 starting on field 20 or city starting on field 30. We can also take, rather than a flat file in and a flat file out, standard in and standard out. If you're running on a Unix system, we have a couple of customers that actually have clean file running as a service inside a Unix machine that just automatically change any address that goes from one application to another, standardize it, correct it, and continue it along the named pipe that it's on without even stopping and becoming a stationary file. This is the standard output from a clean file run. You have clean file running against cleanfile.ini, and it is taking a field of 14 different addresses that are coming in, and it looks like 6 of those addresses failed validation. 2 of them were unknown street, 3 of them had a suite or apartment missing, and 1 had a street number invalid. And the out file would still contain all that information, and you'd be able to tell from looking at the out file what was probably wrong with the address that came through. The standard way of calling clean file is by putting clean file and the name of the INI file. A lot of people run 15 or 20 different kinds of INI files in the directory that holds it. So you would run clean file space alumni update.ini, clean file space new hires.ini, clean file something else. You can also change the name of clean file to match the INI. If you double click on clean file in this instance we're looking at here, cleanfile.ini would automatically be run. If you have a secondary file called newhires.ini, you could theoretically copy cleanfile.exe, name it newhires.exe, and at that point in time, you'd be able to double click on newhires.exe. It would automatically use newhires.ini as the INI file, and would automatically parse your new file's flat file, which is in your bin directory, and spool out a new hires validated address form.
All right, that's awesome. Let's see what that would look like here in this demo. Do you wouldn't mind walking us through it, Scott? So here's a clean file demo that's been prepared for you.
And if you can forward on to, initially this demo is running against the standard cleanfile.dat and cleanfile.out that were in the bin directory that you currently have. That just works. So I would say let's go forward and see a slightly different application of clean file. In this case, I'm running against a CSV file. Can you move up to 2 minutes? Sorry for the delay there. That was the tail end of the standard clean file in and out using the tab delimited and bar delimited file. Here we're looking at the postal data path and all of the license keys commented out and a web service URL to a CleanAdder WS instance put in. This is showing that CleanFile can also run against a web service that might be hosted someplace else on your application or on in your enterprise. Our in file is a CSV and our out file is a CSV holding comma quote delimited files, which means that if you double click on them, they will open in Excel and it can be edited in Excel by being comma separated. So if I double click instead of opening it with an editor, these are the addresses I want to verify and validate. When I type clean file and go against the single CSV.ini file, it's not going against the local data files. It is hitting a web service that would be running, for instance, if you were running Colleague as your database, or if you were running Transact SQL database, and it validated all of those addresses, put latitudes and longitudes in, standardized everything. This could be running on a secretary or administrative assistant's desktop outside of the president of the company's office. They should be able to update these spreadsheets for him and not even have CleanAddress installed on her desktop. She wouldn't have to update data files or anything. It would just run against the web service in the back end. I think I can hand this back to you if you'd like, Erica. Right now, what I was doing was just taking the comments out in front of gender and time zone string, rerunning it again to show that this is happening live based upon the changes in the INI file, and that changing the output of the file that you're generating is as quick and easy as changing the out file parameters that you're expecting. If you're looking in your own bin directory at the clean file INI, if you go to the very bottom of the INI file, it has a listing of all of the available parameters that you can put in there, both for the in file and the out file. And you can play around with seeing what you can generate at any time. In this case, we have male and female listed as a gender based on the name. And you're going to see on the right-hand side there that it had Central Time Zone, Pacific Time Zone, Eastern Time Zone.
All right, Scott, thanks for that, that quick demo on CleanFile. And again, I think we have some quick framework here to look at in how that CleanFile would actually be launched and how it would hit the engine from time to time. Maybe you want to talk us through this, Scott?
Actually, this is the general application architecture of CleanAddress as it is used. If you look at the CleanAddress square in the middle, we have CleanAddress running against local USPS, DPV, LaxLink, Canadian data files and serving up to CleanAdder D, CleanAdder WS, or CleanFile. If you're going against international addresses, you will be hitting a web service that's on the outside. So you do not need to update your international addresses unless you want to. We do have customers that are overseas obeying privacy laws. And for instance, in France, you're not allowed to have French addresses leave the country. So they run against French addresses in-house and they hit web services going outside to other countries. Same thing holds true in Great Britain. We have another customer that's running Great Britain addresses locally. Your ERPs will then consume CleanAdder D in the case of an Oracle database, CleanAdder WS in the case of Colleague, WebAdvisor, JD Edwards, CleanEntry, etc. CleanFile is run locally on the machine, but as you just saw, that can run against the web service as well. Strangely enough, CleanAdder-D and CleanAdder-WS can also consume that web service. It's the same section. You just point the web service section at a CleanAdder-WS instance that's running in your enterprise, and you can put a CleanAdder-D, CleanAdder-WS, or CleanFile anywhere you want to, and it will consume that web service and run wherever you'd like it to be.
All right, great. Well, that covers the CleanFile component. Again, if anybody has any questions, concerning CleanFile, Misty's definitely on it, and we'll certainly answer those questions at the end of the presentation. We'd like to move forward on to the discussion of shadow tables, and this is going to talk about the flex fields, county codes, geocoding, and a few other components that actually are delivered with CleanAddress. And again, these are, if they're not available on the application's forms or pages, this is where this information would reside as it's delivered from CleanAddress. And Scott's going to talk a little bit about these shadow tables as they exist in your particular application.
Now, unfortunately, if you are running most ERPs or CRMs, they contain the fields in their address table or person table or employee table that are required for the address page or the person page or the employee page. And there are fields that come back from CleanAddress like latitude, longitude, county, FIPS, congressional district that you may not have a place to store. In most of our applications, we do have shadow tables available that mirror the tables that hold those addresses and employee records. They have the same primary key that your address table or employee table would have, and they hold information that CleanAddress can store or pull from in case you want to have latitude and longitude stored. In some cases, Banner 9, for instance, has a number of flex fields available that you can even customize to put whatever you want in the shadow table, but earlier versions of Banner may not have the flex fields available for all of the fields that you want to use. You can mirror or mimic that kind of functionality, at least in the batch jobs, in order to be able to store those fields as you want to in a customized way. And there you see the additional fields that are included. For instance, Flex 1, 2, and 3, which can be customized as you wish. Latitude and longitude is there. Phone distance, which I'm not sure what this particular back-end ERP is for, but there's an easy formula that you can use to calculate distance from one latitude, longitude to another latitude, longitude, and you could have storing how far an employee lives from corporate headquarters or from another latitude and longitude. County code considerations, since Eric's got the slide up here, there's a number of different ways that you can store county codes. We have in our INI file the ability to choose from standard county codes, but we tend to have a shadow table specifically for county codes so that you can use custom county codes. A lot of people use custom county codes for a given state. I know Michigan loves to have standard custom county codes for their own use. And in this case, we can do reverse lookups and get the county codes that you would like to see displayed, which may not necessarily be the ones that the USPS uses. Geocoding is included by default in CleanAddress. If you ask for latitude and longitude back from the web service, from the CleanAddress verify procedure, or from CleanFile, it will give you the latitude and longitude back, although it may not be as accurate as some places may give it to you out of the box. We verify against the 5-digit zip code with our included Geocoder Basic. which means that if 33432 is the zip code that you have, the USPS database gives us the centroid of that zip code as a latitude and longitude. If you wish, you can subscribe to our geocoder service, which is also through the USPS, and gives the latitude and longitude of the zip +4, which is only, in most cases, about the size of 5 or 6 city blocks. GeoPoints gives the delivery point latitude and longitude, which is the mailbox out in front of the house. So if you would like to have the latitude and longitude precise to about 1.5 inches to the mailbox delivery vehicle for that particular address, then you can subscribe to GeoPoints. That can vary depending upon the type of address that you're looking at, of course. If you're going for stores in a shopping mall, chances are that they're all going to have the same latitude and longitude because the mail delivery box is going to be in the same place. There are a number of interfaces out there that can take spreadsheets full of latitudes and longitudes. Google Maps, for instance, will allow you to just take a table, a Google table full of latitudes and longitudes, hook it up to Google Maps, and it will set up flags similar to the ones that you have there. You can also use geocoding to set up targeted mailing campaigns for everybody that's within a certain distance of a given place so that you don't end up wasting your money sending coupons to people that are never going to be able to use those coupons because they've got a 2-hour drive in order to be able to utilize them properly.
And Scott, these geocoding out of the box, they would be located in the shadow tables? Is that how they would access it?
Usually you put them in the shadow tables. You can also use CleanFile in order to spool out a bunch of addresses and then have a spreadsheet full of latitudes and longitudes generated by that application.
Great.
So we did want to bring forward, and some folks don't know that we have integration partners, and one of them, believe it or not, is Axiom. A lot of folks here may be using Axiom, and we just wanted to let everybody know that there is an integration into Axiom with Clean Address. So don't think that you do not have that ability to do address verification while moving your data from one point to the other, because Axiom does have the ability to do that through their own integration into Clean Address. Again, that would be something that you would have to reach out to them, but we just, as we're doing this deep dive, we thought we should at least make you aware that there are integration partners out there. With our 22 years of business, we have had a lot of partners, and we have a lot of integration partners out there and a lot of different applications. So this is just one of them. We did want to make sure that everybody knew, because I think, at least from a higher education perspective, Axiom is a widely used application, and we just wanted to bring it to your attention. So as we start wrapping this up, we definitely wanted to talk about some of the real-time and batch processing gotchas and common issues. Scott, I'm going to hand this over to you to just briefly talk about some of these points, and then we'll keep moving on throughout the presentation. Again, if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to put them in that chat box so that Misty can handle them.
The first issue primarily talks to the batch verification of addresses that are in your database. You probably do not want to update previously verified addresses, primarily because previously verified addresses are also addresses which you have flagged as being overridden. So if someone lives in a new address or a new domicile that the USPS did not have in the database when it was put into your system, it would be flagged as being validated against already, and it would never be validated against, so it would be good. There are some situations where that may not be the case. For instance, Banner 9, they've actually split out that functionality between overridden addresses and verified addresses so that you can go back against verified addresses. And there's something called LaxLink, where if a street name changes from Main Street to Martin Luther King Boulevard, you'll be able to catch that kind of a change taking place with your previously validated addresses. You can have more than one address in an address field. It is possible. It is not it is not suggested, and it is not something that you want to do. So I would say that if you can go through your address tables and your addresses before you even start validating them and make sure that you only have one address in an address field, do that, please. That's probably where we get a good 10% of our user complaints against our system, when the real culprit is the fact that you're trying to validate against a post office box and a street address, and there is only one valid address that's going to tie to the ZIP+4 for that place. If the piece of mail goes to a ZIP+4, then the post office will deliver it to whichever one of those two addresses actually exists there. And you shouldn't be handing off the decision as to where your piece of mail is going to another party besides yourself anyway. There's reasons why there are different kinds of addresses in your database. You'll have a PO box type and a street address type. Colleague does not have a shadow table at this time. If you want to store information like latitude and longitude or the residential business indicator, you're going to have to do that outside of Colleague, or you're going to have to do some custom coding. Batch processing can be scheduled. Most people schedule it for running at night and going through and updating any addresses that have somehow managed to get into their database through feeds or back-end systems, but you can also do it manually. International verification is only as good as the country's postal service data integrity, and that matters because most of our international customers do not want to validate against bad data. China is notoriously bad. India is notoriously bad. If you're always going to get this address is likely deliverable as an answer, and you're still going to end up paying however much they charge per address, I think it's 1 cent or 2 cents each, then you might as well skip those addresses. And if the USPS doesn't know about an address, or it doesn't have the ability to verify against it, it's not going to come back as a valid address. That's why we have a override address verification checklist. They do not know about new addresses. They don't even care about addresses that they can't get to. And there are addresses that I've got a couple of complaints that have been filed against addresses in places like Wisconsin and Minnesota, where the post office does not have carriers that go out to the addresses. And you're supposed to have your mail delivered to a post office box in town. And if you put an address on a street, they're not going to be able to take it to you anyway. Anything else? Nope.
So as we talk about some of the batch processing, we are definitely running a little bit behind here. We're going to keep up. We're going to start picking up the pace. So we have some included reporting. We definitely wanted to let everybody know that there are reports that do come with clean address, and they are accessible. We did talk about briefly about the radius search, but I think we're going to get into it a little bit more. We have a compare address change report and address summary report, and we're going to show you what they look like and some of the things that you can do in order to work a little bit better with the batch processing that you're currently doing. So an address error summary report, we briefly had one that was put up using CleanFile, and this is what it would look like if you ran the batch process and then did an address error summary report. Again, this is a summation of the addresses that were processed. There were, in this case, 500 addresses processed. 449 showed as no error. Now, it's a little bit misleading. There may have been wrought with errors, but there was enough information there that Clean Address was able to automatically correct. So therefore, it reached a no error conclusion. However, the other 51 addresses that do kick out are error-ridden and do need human intervention in order to have them corrected. Again, we just want to give you some snapshots as to what we deliver. And again, if there's anything further you want to add on this particular report, Scott, feel free to jump in.
If you're able to do it, having the company name populated and having the last name field populated will correct the suite or apartment missing errors. That is a common issue with addresses coming in, not having the apartments. Suite Link is included as part of the delivery point validation system. And if the company name is there, for instance, here at Runner Technologies, if you have the name Runner in 2424 Federal Highway, our suite number 100 is automatically added by clean address. There's another service called Suite Finder, which is an additional charge, and that will take a last name and put the address, apartment number, or suite number in for anybody that's missing it, if you are able to put that last name in.
All right, great. I think we may have a slide that touches base with that later on, but that's definitely good insight. Now, we do have a radius search report. Now, this is going to help you from a business perspective, along with some other functionality that you may want to achieve to identify certain population sets that you have. And again, this radius search is going to allow you to identify those population sets from a certain distance around the zip code. And Scott, if you want to further interject some more information here, please do.
The only thing I have to add is that the radius search report is an Oracle-specific SQL query. If you need to do a radius determination between two latitudes and longitudes, the shortcut formula down there can be used in Excel. You can put that in as a formula pull down in an Excel spreadsheet and set latitude 1, longitude 1 to be a specific set of fields on that spreadsheet, and it'll automatically give you the distance in miles between any latitude and longitude at a given point.
That sounds good, and Scott will be more than happy to provide that to you if you haven't gotten a quick chance to copy this down, because I know it's pretty lengthy, but we can definitely make this available to you at any given time. The compare address change report, I know it's a little bit small, but on the right, that's what it looks like. So I think Scott did touch upon the address report on the very onset of this presentation. And basically what you're going to see is the original address as you had it, and the converted address, or the new address, as Clean Address did its changes. You'll also notice that there's a column where there's an error code and an error message, which identifies those records that had errors in them. So in this case, there was a suite or apartment number that was invalid, a multiple match, meaning that there must have been a duplicate record somewhere, and of course some others that were called out earlier. So again, this is just a quick snapshot to allow you to see what those addresses may have looked like that you currently had, and the resultant after a batch process using Clean Address. Again, I'm going to ask Scott to interject some more feedback here to further explain the compare address change report.
No, primarily the only thing I would say is that you can set the FB update field to be 0, and it will give you this report if you want to check it before you update. And if you set it to be true and you make your changes, you can go through this report, and if there's anything that stands out as being something you didn't want to have happen, you can always roll it back.
All right, that's great feedback. And again, I think we touched upon that at the very onset of this particular presentation. So additional things to know as we wrap up this webinar. I think Scott actually just talked about that Suite Link as being part of the delivery point validation, but again, I'll let Scott touch upon all of these various things that you may want to know with Clean Address.
I just touched on Suite Link, which is part of delivery point validation. That's included with the product out of the box. And that will allow you to put suites or apartment numbers in for businesses if company name is populated. Suite Finder is an additional charge, but that is giving you the suite or apartments for every individual's apartment in the United States based upon last name. RBDI will tell you whether or not an address is a business or a residence. We covered international verification. You're the one that determines where the address goes. You should try to set one address in every address record, not two. And if the USPS doesn't have a particular address, we talked about that before too.
All right, well, this is something that is quite a fun fact, but I definitely think you should know about it because it does affect everybody here. As we actually close in on the hour, we're going to actually look on that left-hand side, and the one statistic that we want to call out here is that 2,700 individuals have changed their address in the time that we've presented this thing to you. So just know that your database is a living thing. People are constantly on the move. As a matter of fact, that statistic is 18% of the population moving each year. In certain demographics, those people will be moving even at a higher rate. So the reason why we're doing this particular slide is for the reason that it's very difficult to keep track of the individuals that you have in your database, and therefore we do have services that help mitigate those problems. Some of you may be using those services, some of you may not. You may want to understand how much it's costing you. Well, Pitney Bowes came up with a number of $25. It's costing you for $25 for every returned piece of mail in the case that it was unable to be delivered. So since 18% of the population moves each year, we used a higher education perspective in this particular example. So we used 12,000 students. So if you can imagine using that quick formula of 12,000 students and 18% of them moving, that gave us 2,160 students moving annually with a potential hidden cost of $54,000 using that $25 cost as a calculation measure. So again, that number may be more or less something that you're dealing with, but we definitely want to make sure that you're aware that this is a component that affects your costs, and there are components built in with Clean Address that will help you mitigate this problem. If you want to take a quick snapshot of that big return mail bucket, 76% of that return mail is move related. So that way you can just quickly understand how much that's costing you each year, and the tool that you're going to conquer that problem with is this, change of address processing. I'm going to throw this back over to Scott to discuss this quickly and how you can deploy these services using the hooks that we created with the various applications with Clean Address to enable this NCOA, MCOA, PCOA process. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, primarily we took this on because our data providers give us access to the NCOA and other processes for contacting lost people out of the box. And we already had the hooks in most of our ERP and CRM systems in order to pull data out and put data in, and we understood the rules that were around them. So there is a staging table in most of our ERP and CRM solutions that will allow you to take a flat file that has been processed and corrected and had moves tagged in it, load it in, run reports against it, and then import those moves back into the address as a changed address. NCOA Link is the USPS's service that they run. I'm guessing that we can match anybody's price on the NCOA Link process at this point in time. So I would say come against us because we're giving it as a service to our customers and we get it for a discount. MCOA is for lost people. If you have returned mail and you don't know where this person has gone, MCOA uses utility companies, credit card receipts, and things like that in order to get people back. You do not want to run it probably on people that you already have hooks on because there are possibilities of false positives. If a student is off at college and sends their credit card bills and utility bills to their parents, you don't want that person to be tagged as a move. And NCOA Link wouldn't. NCOA Link also is called Link because it catches things progressively. So if you move from an address to another address, and then move from that address to a third address, and then move from that address to a fourth address, then NCOA Link will take the first address and move you all along the link. Whereas MCOA may or may not do that and may not catch you moving back. PCOA, proprietary change of address, is a little bit more expensive. It goes a little bit further and has less false positives, but it's something that you also probably want to use on people that you've actually lost just because of the difference in price between NCOA, which is a standard service, and PCOA, which is using a little bit more in-depth searching in order to find people. Do we talk about other data enhancement services?
No, we don't. So at this point, as it relates to Clean Address, we do have the updates. We have two subscription types, monthly as well as bi-monthly. Just want to make sure that everybody is aware that there is an update process applicable to Clean Address to make sure that you have, from the domestic perspective, all of those addresses and data files available to you to make sure that your database is up to speed. Again, there is a monthly subscription and a bi-monthly subscription available. And the bi-monthly data file schedule is as follows: February, April, June, August, October, and December. So you should be receiving a link from us. And if you're not, then definitely contact us because you should be receiving something from Misty's customer success team. Again, I don't know from the technical perspective, Scott, if you have anything to inject but we do have certain steps that are involved with those bi-monthly and monthly updates. And I think we talked about this in our deep dive with the bi-monthly update webinar we had previously. We do have links to that if anybody has any questions. Right now, I know we are moving up on a little bit of beyond our 45-minute window, so we want to start getting this thing wrapped up into questions that you may have had during this presentation. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to pass this on to Misty to go over those questions that may have come in from you, and then we will open it up to have those answers from Scott where applicable. Go ahead, Misty.
All right, so our first question is from Peter, and he asked, what parameters are different between 4.5 and 5x INI files? And if we upgrade, where do we get the INI files?
There are no differences that I'm aware of between the 4.5 and the 5.0 INI files. The difference between 4.5 and 5.0 is reflected in the exe file itself.
Perfect, perfect. And our next question is from Marina, and she asked, what version were we running for the demo? And she was referencing the functional user demo.
Which version of PeopleSoft?
Yeah, I think it was.
That was probably 4.5.
Yeah.
4.5, Marina. And then Peter asked, was the demo through web services or CleanAdder D? And he's also referencing the functional user demo.
The functional user demo is CleanAdder D.
Awesome, awesome. Our next question is from Sadana. She says, like PeopleSoft, does Banner also have the feature that changes address fields when a country is selected?
No, that's based upon the actual screens that the ERP has in place. PeopleSoft changes its screens based on country, and Banner does not. That's not Clean Address functionality.
Awesome. John asks, does Clean File work with international address?
Yes, it does. Actually, the Clean File demo that we just did up there had one Nigerian address.
Awesome. Brenda asks, what is the content of the 2 files we reload every 2 months?
You have, there's 2 zip files that you download. There was a time when we sent everything out on CDs, and the main reason why there's 2 files is because in order to fit them on CDs, we had one set that was the basic validation for an address, which included ranges. So if you put 495 Northwest 16th Street on, it would tell you that 16th Street has 301 to 372 odd and 300 to 372 even, and it would validate that address as being good whether or not the house actually existed. Delivery point validation is your second subscription. That breaks up that range into specific street number primaries and secondaries, which are apartments and suites. And it will tell you whether or not your suite or apartment is valid and whether your street number is invalid. So your 2 uploads every month contain the full set of deliverable addresses from the USPS. Everything in the data files directories of those 2 downloads should go into your Clean Address Home/data files directory.
Perfect. Stephen asks, any likelihood you could create a Java API component for cleaning addresses? It would help with our job integration.
You may want to contact support about that. We've got a number of Java integrations already. We'd need to know how you're trying to access it.
Awesome. Greg asks, where can I find the latest and greatest and most complete documentation on how to use Clean Address features and functionality?
Unfortunately, the latest and greatest tends to be specific to an ERP. You can go to our support and they will be able to set you up with the ERP. Unfortunately, that was the reason why we put this meeting together, was because a lot of this is cross-ERP functionality. Clean File is actually developed by people who needed a non-database backed integration. The web service was put together for people that were using Transact SQL and MySQL and web-based integrations. and Oracle was built for people that were on Oracle, and we're trying to give you visibility to the different ways that other ERPs are accessing our data so that you can make more use of the integration that you have already.
Awesome. Christine asks, where do we find reports for batch processing? Reports that end users can access to show what was updated and what the errors are.
Unfortunately, most of our batch processing reports are visible to the people that are running the batch reports on the integrations themselves. They are not a web-based report. That is something that we have slated to look at as a future feature for the application.
Awesome. Marina asks, can you explain again why when you run verification in batch, you have to run in update mode false the first time? Is there a detailed report of the address error summary report?
Did you ask that question before Eric finished up with the detail report?
She did.
It's not necessary to run with update set to false. I recommend it because that's the way I would want to make sure that I didn't make a mistake putting the batch update together in the first place as a system administrator.
Perfect. Peter asks, how do we get the presentation recording? Glad that you asked. We will be sending after it's going to take maybe about an hour or so for us to get everything downloaded. And we're actually going to email you all after we got the recording back and give you a link to review the recording. So everyone will receive a link for instant replay of this webinar later this afternoon, or worst case scenario, first thing tomorrow morning. And our next question is from Marina. She asks, does the software have any functionality to categorize an address as urban or rural?
No, the USPS doesn't give us that. We have business or residential, and that's pretty much all that we've got.
And then John asks, what do you mean by flex fields in Banner 9? I am not aware of any flex fields.
Flex fields are actually used throughout the clean address architecture. A flex field does not hold anything most of the time, but it allows for future functionality. So most of our tables, when we build custom integrations, have a number of flex fields in them which don't hold anything, so that we don't have to rewrite all of our PL SQL packages and have them fail when the tables change or when the PL SQL packages change because we've put something else in, and that would require everyone that's running a given integration to update everything, not just their clean address data files and binaries, but the PL SQL packages and everything else that goes along with it. So because we have those flex fields in place, we can use them for other things. In the case of Banner 9, we do have a shadow table which has 10 flex fields in it, and you can use those flex fields to store whatever you like, especially if you start from the end and start working forward with flex field 10.
Awesome. Anonymous asks, is geocoding available outside the United States?
We do have Canadian geocoding built in. For addresses outside of the United States, we are not getting it back from our existing integration. I believe that we have a secondary web service that we can call that does give latitudes and longitudes back. You can ask support about that, and we can probably set you up.
Awesome. Heidi asks, is there a clean address _ Banner package for batch verified compatible with Banner 9?
I believe there is. I'm not one of the Banner 9 developers. That's a separate team. But I think that everything that they've got runs in batch mode. Every integration we have runs in batch mode, so I can't believe that it does not.
Perfect. Anonymous asks, we get DPV and USPS files as bi-monthly updates. What is the DPV file, and what does the DPV file do, and what is SweetLink and what does it do?
The DPV picks out exactly which apartments and street numbers are valid and not ranges, as I mentioned before. SweetLink actually ties company names to suites. So if you have an address without a suite in it and you have a company, it will put the suite in for you.
Perfect. And our last question is from Mary. She said, we are a Banner customer. is county information available only with the shadow table?
That's a banner-specific question, and I'm not sure. Clean Address does come back with the county information for every address that's verified. You don't necessarily need to have it there. I believe that we've got a shadow table that we do use for the county information.
Awesome. And also, Mary, you can always, and anyone else on this webinar, you guys can always email support@runner.edu if you have any further questions or if you need any more detail to any of the questions you guys have today. And that's our last question, Eric. I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Misty, and thanks, Scott. And thank you for attending this webinar. I know we went over a little. And again, we know your time is valuable, and hopefully you were able to absorb some information that you may not have known about our products and solutions here at Runner EDQ. We again thank you for your time, and if you have any further questions regarding anything that you saw here on this webinar, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is at the bottom of this particular slide. And again, definitely feel free to reach out to Misty and her team at Customer Success. As you are all valuable customers here, we do thank you, and on behalf of the team here at Runner EDQ, I would like to thank you for joining us on your beautiful afternoon here on a Thursday in January. And again, we look forward to having the opportunity to serve you in the near future. Thank you very much, and we look forward to serving you again. Bye-bye.